Welcome, everybody. My name is Mark Suter, and we are going to be looking at all the things that I've screwed up over the last 10 or 15 years of teaching with Unity to do computer programming, VR development, all kinds of fun stuff. I'll be watching the Discord chat on the right there, or you can jump in on the voice chat as well. That's fine. But let's jump in. So I have been the last 18 years a high school classroom teacher and doing some college adjuncting. I lost that job last year. The school district's having trouble passing levies, and so I am now working at University of Northwestern Ohio, where I'm an adjunct instructor of all kinds of fun things, including digital forensics and programming. So I'm also looking for extra work, but this is a good start, and it's actually a really fun thing. I actually just started class today with my college students. So you can find me on LinkedIn there, Mark Suter 1. Apparently Mark Suter was taken. So when you first start teaching students Unity, if you jump right into Unity, and you're like, okay, this is Unity Hub, and then we're going to install Unity, and then we're going to install GitHub, and then we're going to make a game and learn coding and learn Unity, and there's getting a lot thrown at them. And in my experience, I've actually found, in fact, today, my first day of class with my programming students, we didn't actually even use the computer. Actually, we did to play a game, but I'll get to that later. And so I have a couple of theories of how to intro students to it, and it makes the learning go a lot faster the rest of the semester, and it just works good. First is setting the culture. The tone in my classroom is always mistakes are encouraged, and you can't steer a parked car, so you basically have to start somewhere, right, and then course correct as you go. I actually told them today about their final projects. I said, I don't care if you finish your final project, which sounds insane, right? Why would a teacher tell their students that? But I found that if I say, well, if you don't get it done, you get a big deduction in points or whatever. What does everybody do? They pick the easiest project possible. So I found that by saying, you know what? I don't actually care if you finish your project. All I care about is what you do from bell to bell. Well, there's not bells at college, but from the start of the period to the end of the period, right? Pick something that's challenging to you. And that has worked really well because then you get a lot higher quality projects. I don't know if that's the best strategy, but that works really well for my students. Second, I'm always learning with you. My saying is I'm always a student, sometimes a teacher, because it's one of those things where the more you learn about something, the more you realize how much there is you don't know. But I'm getting better at it. So I would say 14, 15 years in Unity now, and I'm just starting to get the hang of it a little bit. I'm still not a pro coder or anything, but even though I teach computer programming classes. Also, today I explained to my students, this one kid was showing me on their tablet like all these concept drawings for this multiplayer game they want to make with their friends. And I said, you know what? I wouldn't recommend trying to make a super complicated, especially multiplayer game as your first experience. You know, make the little mini games and like create with code on the Unity Learn site, things like that, right? You're not making Call of Duty and Fortnite this semester. So instead focus on like small playable concepts, learning lots of different skills, right? Because there's so many things to learn from. You know, you can download 3D models and you can use AI to generate various things, but there's coding and animation to, all those things. Second of all, remember they're learning usually both C# and Unity at the same time. While Unity isn't as frustratingly complicated as something like Blender, in my opinion, anyways. Blender, it drives me nuts. I'm just not good at it. But I could get better. But it's very, very difficult for me. But I do use it. So remember, they're learning a lot of software all at once and good design trends. Like I had a student answer a question today. We'll just put a bunch of text up there so the player knows what to do next. And I said, well, whenever possible, you don't want to make them read, because whenever you're coming up to a presentation like you're looking at right now, right, there's a bunch of text on the screen. The first thing your brain does is like, ugh, I really don't want to look at that. Errors are normal, so learn debugging. Sometimes students think they need to do this like 16-hour grind kind of thing and like knock out an entire game. Well, that's possible, and game jams sometimes require it. But I always tell them, just be consistent and learn things every day. There's going to be problems. There's going to be difficulties along the way. Now, this is a tricky one because we all want to use AI, and I love AI. But when I'm teaching Unity and coding, I want to get them the underlying principles first. So I don't let them use AI in the beginning. Towards the end of the semester, I let them, to some degree, use it. And I love AI. It's incredible. But let's learn the basics first so you can really utilize it later and not just be copy pasting scripts that you have no idea what they do. Right? Because if you copy paste a script, you want to modify it, or it's amazing. And there's lots of other sources out there besides ChatGPT. Like GitHub has its own coding, everything. There's lots of them. Claude. Microsoft. Okay. So do you like the Microsoft Copilot? I do like Copilot. I actually like their image generation. They have a really good photorealism. If you add that tag, like create a photorealistic image of there's several of them it creates where I can't tell the difference between an actual photograph and that. Before, it kind of had this sheen or shine or I don't know, something on the image. It made it look AI. It had that uncanny valley phenomenon going on. The autocomplete in the Visual Studio Code, but having it write everything for you, especially for students, it's just not for me. Now, as promised, there was a picture of a chicken, me holding a chicken, I should say. This chicken's name was rest in peace, Nugget. This is the chicken named Nugget. And Nugget made an appearance. I got to do a live show for Unity during COVID, and so I was trying to do stupid stuff to entertain people. So I had pictures of goats and things because I live out in the middle of nowhere, and so I started bringing like wild animals like chickens and stuff in. Well, they're domesticated, but they don't live in the house. So that's Nugget, and that's the only bonus content I have for you. Sorry. Who a snack. See, chicken nugget. You get it. I've got to do a lot of cool things. And the point of showing you of some of these photos is constantly learning. And whenever I talk to teachers and try to teach them about Unity and how to use Unity, I'm constantly changing kind of the advice of what I say. This is Carl from if you've done Create with Code, you know Carl. So I was fortunate enough to spend some time with him and talk about how to do instruction, because obviously he helped create that whole course. Last fall, about a year ago, I got to go to Meta and do a very short talk. I was one of many other people there, other educators and stuff, with my beautiful wife. And we got to do fun things there. I've done some VR production for actual companies, not just as class projects. So Mr. Manhole, it's this awesome giant tool that cuts a hole in the street around a manhole. Anyway, they wanted a VR experience that they could then take to like conferences in Vegas and have clients, because you can't transport this giant drill looking thing with it doesn't ship very well, we'll say. So they would take it to conferences and have people experience it in VR. And so that's the creator. They're testing out the VR app that I made. And this was my classroom before, and I'm a big fan of bringing in guest speakers, even if you have to do it online, like a Zoom call or something like this. And I developed a policy of having students bring in their own guest speaker, and it's an assignment. I say, okay, you have between this month and towards the end of the school year month to bring in a guest speaker, and there's 3 categories. Category 3, the top level, are the people who are basically no chance of them coming in, and they have to get a no or a non-response for a certain amount of time from a level 3. And that has resulted in some really interesting speakers. Like we had the head of robotics from Boston Dynamics speak on a Zoom call. We've had Saturday Night Live musician manager, their manager, not the musician, come on. It's just really interesting things. So level 2 is person. It's like, probably not, but it's worth asking, right? So that could be like the mayor of your city or something like that, where it's not like okay, yeah, there's 0 chance or a 1% chance. And then level 1 is the easiest. So it's like, oh, my uncle does game design or is a programmer or something. And it's not that level 1s are less impressive. It's just they're the easiest to bring in. And so we've gotten some really cool guest speakers, and it also gets kids getting used to a little bit of failure. Yeah, shoot for the top. And to finish some process. But James Portnow. Oh, wow. From Extra Credits. I love that. I show my students those videos. That's pretty cool. I want to go to your university. So anyways, bringing in guest speakers like that has been really cool, and having the students do it makes them very vested, right? They're certainly interested because they're bringing the guest speaker, and they also want to, impress their friends and things like that. I've taken students to a lot of conferences, which is always cool. This one we were presenting on VR development for like companies doing job training simulations. So it's always cool to feature them. This for you, D. By the way, if you're a teacher and you've not looked into Fund for Teachers, you really need to do so, because they basically, you dream up your dream field trip. Let's say I said, I want to go to this VR conference in London, and I want to go see a bunch of companies around France that do VR and AR in Unity. And they said, okay, here you go. So this is the picture that, you got prove that you did what you said you're going to do. But this is Realcast Studio in Paris, and they were making a HoloLens experience for some underground dungeons around Paris. I don't know, something. It was really cool. What was interesting was I thought, okay, I want to see what developers are doing all over the world. And of course, this is in French, so I can barely read it. It took 3 years of French in high school. But I love that their brainstorms they're constantly taking notes, whether it's digital, written. Everybody has their own, preference. But I love that, hey, look, splines. I know what splines are. But they have rough drawings, and they have, arrows and all kinds of little notes and things, because as you're developing, you're like, okay, then I need to do A and then B. Oh, actually, I need to do C before B, and things like that. I think it's really cool. And so I asked this lady, I said, so you went to school to be a programmer? And she said, yeah. And I said, what would you, I teach students programming and VR development and stuff. And I said, what advice would you give to the teachers that are teaching VR development? And she said, even at the university level, she said it with a cool accent, but I don't have the accent, all they did in programming class was a bunch of, text input, text output. And yes, that is traditional coding, and that's how a lot of it is taught. And I do understand that Unity, for a purist of coding, may not approve of Unity's modified version of C#, but it's still C#. And she said, I wish we would have learned coding using something like Unity, so I would have some sort of like tangible output, right? So when I hit the W key, something happens on my screen, right? It makes them a lot more interested, and they can get the concepts, in my opinion, I think they get the concepts faster. It also increases their motivation, their will to learn the stuff, right? It's much more interesting. A lot of those students that I have in programming class right now, 90% of them are actually multimedia majors, but are taking a programming class, which not everybody's going to be that case. But D says, I once applied for a company in France doing Unity game dev. Apparently I don't have the skills. I bet you do. That's cool. I'm curious now about that. I want to ask you about that later. Anyways, and so I thought it was cool that she said, I wish I would have learned in college how to program by using Unity and programming in C# there. Another option is to use something like Zoe. They have a VR app where you can make things. This is, I think, maybe an old version of the app, but it's a screenshot that I had, where you can do some interactions right there in the headset. So you're building a VR experience in VR. Very meta, especially because you're on a Quest 2. But it is really cool. So I've been using that off and on for years. And now they have a plugin for Unity where you can do VR experiences, kind of VR logic with no code, which is awesome. But I will give full disclosure that meta puns, how meta. I see what you did there. Full disclosure, I just made a whole series of videos for Zoe for Unity. So I do have a vested interest there, but so this is just getting started with their plugin. It is a subscription, but it's very affordable for classrooms. I love it. I think it's a great way because a lot of students, if they're only going to be in there one semester, they're not going to be able to learn all the code to build a VR game that's really good and learn VR development at the same time, right? It's like trying to take 3 classes in one class period. So this kind of skips over that need to learn how to code if they just want to make VR apps and stuff, which is kind of cool. So I wanted to talk about pseudocode. Oh my gosh, I spelled pseudocode. You know what? Gosh darn it, I'm fixing it right now. Pseudocode, right? Is that right? I think that's right. Oh, okay, whew. Makes me feel better. This is what I taught today in my Intro to Programming class at University of Northwest Ohio. I had them, we talked about Pac-Man a little bit, and I said, okay. And then I showed them this game. It's called Dodge Puck. It's actually called Eskiv, ESKIV, if you look it up on the internet. It's a very basic game where you know what, or I actually think I have it open in another window. This could fall apart in a hurry, folks. I don't know. Oh, here we go. So on itch.io, if you just look up itch.io Dodge Puck, you'll probably find it. So when you collect these little squares, a new guy or a new puck shows up, right? And so I said, okay, now you've played the game. I let him play it for a few minutes. And I said, okay, now I want you to think like a programmer. And I said, I call it a UFO. I don't know what it is. When the UFO hits the square, the emoji square, do blank. And at first the responses were almost player-centric in that they would say, create another puck. I said, okay, if that's the only logic we add, that puck might just keep showing up in the exact same spot and it just sits there. And they're like, well, create it and tell it to start moving. Okay, so when I hit the square, then create a puck that is moving. And so I kind of, draw off on the whiteboard way off to the northeast of the whole play area because I was doodling along with this. And then they refine it a little more and say, okay, create a Dodge Puck in a random location that can only move left, right, up, down. And so we converted that to degrees, 0, 90, 180, 270. I said, okay, pick from a range or a list, actually, of 4 options. I said, okay, what about where are we creating it? They said, well, it's random. I said, yeah, but you could say random X, random Y, and X could be 3 billion and Y could be negative 48 trillion. And they said, well, okay. So we figured out, okay, so generate it within a range of, let's say 0 to 100X, and from a range of 0 to 100Y, and then pick a direction from a list of 4 options, and then start moving at a speed of 5, let's say, right? The numbers don't matter. It's just conceptual at this point. And there we go. And so as they're describing this, they start getting a lot better at thinking like a programmer. And then there's the matter of, okay, so we need to write a code of when I hit one of the UFO hits one of the pucks, what happens? And they say, well, the game's over. I said, well, from a player perspective, yes, that's all that's happening. But sorry, I lost my train of thought. When the UFO hits the puck, the game is not just over. I said, basically, you could pause it there. Unity has you could pause the game, basically, time equals 0. Or you could join. Am I like Pac-Man? I heard it join the dark side, Darth. Oh, that's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned thinking like a programmer. I explained to everyone if they go shopping, they can already program. That's interesting because you're thinking sequentially of what you need to create the output, like what you're cooking for dinner. Is that what you're saying? That's cool. Um, anyway, sorry, that was a horrible animated GIF. I forgot to trim that up before I made it a GIF. And I do say GIF because the creator of GIF says it's pronounced GIF. Look it up. Um, Anyways, so we get them pseudocoding, and that has worked wonders because on the next class period, yes, we're going to start learning actual C sharp code. And, and I told them at the end of the semester, you can make Dodge Puck if you want. I actually have an entire series of tutorial videos on how we made it. The first time I made it with students, we didn't know what we were doing, so we had to pseudocode the whole thing and figure it out to kind of backwards reverse engineer it, rather. Because if no milk in house, do shopping. I like it. But conceptually, they then start to feel more confident in it. Sometimes people will call it the rubber ducky method, where you have to, some programmers will have, the rubber duck on their computer and they have to explain to the rubber duck what they want to happen. Well, I think it's more interesting and helpful to pseudocode to each other or to me, so I can kind of give them feedback on like, okay, you can't just say generate random. You have to generate a random within a range for X and do the same for Y, et cetera, et cetera. Moving on, version control. Very helpful with students because a lot of times they're going to start making something at school, and many of them will want to also work on it somewhere else, another lab on campus or at home, whatever. And so setting that up is really important. I'm not going to explain to all of you what it is because you already know, but that's why I definitely because GitHub has a specific format, a git ignore. It's called for Unity, so it keeps the file uploads very manageable. They're not very big files. It's not that many of them. So I do have a video on that if anybody cares. That's what I literally show my students when we set up GitHub Desktop. Yes, I know a lot of people are purist and will use the command line of GitHub for pull requests and things like that. I just have them use GitHub Desktop. It's very visual. Again, for a lot of these kids, I only have them for one semester, and then I don't see them again. So I kind of gotta get things rolling. Desktop is great. Well, I'm glad you're reaffirming that because sometimes I get pushback where people are like, no, teach them command line. I'm like, I don't have time. I don't even hardly know it. And I'm not very good at it. So there's my classroom doing VR development. Isn't that fun? Yes, 2015 is where it all started with the VR dev. This was I guess you'd call it a 3 degree of freedom, 3 DOF on the Oculus. This is the DK1 or DK2 dev kit for the Oculus. And it was following this tutorial, and you had to like hand code a whole bunch of it. And you literally had to use the keyboard to move one of these boxes, and you just go around and you smash into other boxes. There's no real point to it. It's just an experience. But it was the first thing we ever programmed for. It's supposed to be for like Google Cardboard and stuff. But it was so exciting. It was really fun, and we had no idea. And during the video, he keeps saying like "smash hit" because he keeps smashing into boxes. It was really dumb, but it's one of those memories that just sticks when you start teaching all this kind of stuff. So there it is. There's the original video that I got started with in 2015. Gosh, that's 10 years ago now. Questions. I want to see. Never used GitHub for any version control. Oh, Plastic. And Unity has their own, but I like using GitHub. I just have traditionally used that. I do also want to see if anybody has any questions. I don't want to. I'm very good at rambling on for long periods of time, but I am curious if there are any questions. While you're thinking of that, it is a big change to move from 50-minute class periods at the high school level to hour-and-a-half class periods at the college level. So I have to, actually manage time now. Anyways, okay, good. Some typing. While you're typing, this is one of the companies we partnered with to do VR dev. And again, when teaching students Unity stuff, it's very motivating when you say, you have to talk directly to the client and you're responsible for setting the goals and then meeting those goals, right? And so this factory, they make car parts in Bluffton, Ohio. And this person's job is to pick up the part, inspect it. If it has some like strings of rubber left in that hole, you kind of poke it out with this, and then you put it on the line, orient it a certain way. And if it's a bad part that's not fixable with the little tool there, you toss it into the trash bin down below. And so that was essentially what they had to do, so the company could use it as either a job training or as a like a recruitment at job fairs. So people are like, well, what would I do there if I worked for your company? Then the student at that job fair, or the adult, could put on the headset and say, oh, this is what you do there. And you make it look like a factory, et cetera, et cetera. Have you considered or done much online video lessons? Yes. I'm actually creating a micro-credential for New Mexico State University. Of course, I do like random YouTube videos, mostly on Unity and like some Minecraft education stuff like that. But yes, I love doing the video lessons. One class that I'm teaching for another university is actually online completely. So I do videos for that sometimes. But my favorite tool, honestly, is ScreenPal. It's very cheap subscription, but I'm able to record my screen, pick my, if I'm doing this in real time. You just hit record and that's it. Screen, camera, or both. I'm going to jack up my OBS if I do this. But it's super nice. And then I can actually publish it directly to ScreenPal right there. And I have literally 900 and some videos. That's how long I've been using it and how often I use it over the last, probably 8, 9, 10 years. So I am not a rep for them, but I love their software. It's super easy. It's so fast to knock out a video. It's what I recorded all of the Zoe for Unity videos in. I use ScreenPal for that. The resolution's great. What do you think about the changes from 23 to Unity 6 for teaching purposes? Honestly, the stuff that they changed, two answers. One is most of the kids I only have for 1, maybe 2 semesters, so they don't know the previous version. But as far as for teaching goes, I don't remember when the input system changed, but I do like the new input system. Honestly, most of the changes aren't that relevant for what I'm teaching. So like basic C#, the VR development package has gotten better. I know they keep re-releasing updates to that. I used to use VRTK, Virtual Reality Toolkit, which is another good plugin. But then I just went to the Unity native one because it's gotten pretty darn good. Or just using Zoe for Unity, the no code option. But yeah, that's as far as I've gone into Unity 6. Let's team up. Screen capture, use Movavi. I don't know that one. Sweet. Let's brainstorm later. I love it. Sweet. Another project we did was working with a local auto dealer, and we made a brake changing simulator. So I went with the permission of the car dealer and took some pictures of the lift, right, and then their process, etc. And then we did what's called paper prototyping, right? So if you're doing any kind of VR dev, I highly recommend you do paper prototyping. You can use actual just paper or Legos or whatever you have on hand. And this is a paper prototype that we made. The reason for this is you get through so many more iterations and ideas of what you're going to be making in VR. Like, okay, when the user pushes this is a button down here, right, to make the lift go up. Then you can like physically lift this up at a rough speed, and then the steps are, use the air wrench to take the nuts off, take the tire off, take the brake calipers off, etc., etc. But I learned it from Jesse Shell of Shell Games. He makes, his company in Pittsburgh makes the I Expect You to Die series that's very popular on the Meta Quest 2 and 3. In his book, The Art of Game Design, which is a great book, just about game design in general, which is where I learned about paper prototyping. I got to see him at a conference once, and I asked him about paper prototyping, and he said that they literally stand around in a circle with like popsicle sticks with little like stickers on them with drawings, and they like act out a little scene. So like when the user does this text shows up, and then this moves over in front of them, and things like that. And they, as a team, because they're working across multiple people, it's even more important because now everybody's on the same page. Okay, Bob, you're going to do this graphic here in this animation, etc. So paper prototyping actually saves a lot of time, and it's kind of fun to watch the kids pitch their ideas, because people can ask them questions like, well, what if the user does this? Why don't you have them do this? They can get feedback immediately instead of trying to make it on the computer. I know gray boxing is a great thing, but I actually do these things before we even gray box, a rough concept. This is what the early prototype looked like. There's the lift I made in SketchUp. I helped him out with that part, but and then we made it work. So when you push the orange button there, the whole lift goes up. And I don't know if this is going to show up or not, but it might. Ooh, it's loud in my headphones. This is using the old hand models, obviously, but it did work. Lifted it up, and then it was procedural in that, okay, if you're pulling the trigger and colliding the nuts, then they fall off. That makes that grabbable. And there was an Easter egg I forgot about, that if you click on the box, it spawns a bunch of tires, because who doesn't love to put Easter eggs into their VR games? These are some of the other things I've done on YouTube. A lot of these come out of requests from students, and I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to make a tutorial on it, and I'll show it to you then, right? Because they're like, well, I want to do this, and I honestly, a lot of times I'm like, I don't really know how to do that, but I kind of have a rough idea. And so I start piecing it together, and then I can teach it to them, or just show them the video, because a lot of times there are things that a tutorial for it exactly doesn't exist yet. Like this one, you're throwing tomatoes at this stack of cans on a plank on a pirate ship. Was a little show I did. I used to do a little show called VR Basic Bites, of just basic VR development in Unity, buttons and knobs and stuff like that. Anyway, a lot of that has come out of just requests from students or from people I know, and so I just create stuff. Another fun thing, if you have a knife and touch the brakes, you're cutting people's brake lines, Steve. Awesome. One of the great things that students love is getting to work with these local partners, and sometimes teachers will ask me, okay, so how do you get these people to be involved? And I just go to like the local chamber of commerce and say, hey, can I have 5 minutes to pitch this? And that works really well. So I like it. It's been very effective. Anywho, that's it. What is my pitch? The pitch is, hey, my students are learning VR development, and I have a win-win situation for you. You win because so like here I'm pitching about, this after we did the car dealer, but I wanted to share with other business owners. I said, you get to experience kind of the new technology. We'll bring out a finished product to let your employees try it out and give us feedback. I'll try and get a media story, which has been very successful. Sometimes TV, sometimes paper, websites, whatever. And that gets them positive exposure. Companies are always looking for positive exposure. So working with a school is really good PR. Also, it's very little time of theirs, honestly. Like I might go out and take pictures, or have a student go out and take pictures, so we know what we're kind of building. And then obviously the students win because they're, some partners are, they want to be more hands-on, or some are just like, yeah, that's fine. Show up, take pictures, show up 3 months later or whatever, and we'll try it out. Very hands-off, which is fine. Whatever they want to do. But by creating a win-win and helping them understand, they're going to get good PR, they're going to help students, and their employees will get to, try some of the newest groundbreaking technology, which isn't, I get it, it's not as groundbreaking now, but it's still pretty sweet. So that's generally my pitch, is creating that win-win situation for both sides. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? I feel like, I don't ever want to go longer than anybody cares about, but I put this window on the main one. I probably should have my camera on the other screen so it was recording too, but that's okay. Cool. Any other thoughts, ideas, questions? thank you everybody for coming, and I will post this recording and Kirk will share it out. He said, how do you balance students of different levels, coding, art, etc.? That's a really good question, and I just thought about that today because I have, multimedia students and coding students and infotech students, and so I I let them. I grade according to their ability. Yes, there's bare basics they have to get done, but I do open it up. Sometimes we don't even get through all the chapters on, let's say it's a game design class, we're doing Create with VR, we're doing VR development. Sometimes we might only get through the first 3 units before I say, you know what, this is taking longer than I want. We're going to do the final projects now and give you more time for that, and give them guidelines on, okay, since it's a VR course, you can do this % of time on art, et cetera, and let them group up and say, hey, I really like doing 3D modeling, et cetera. Awesome. I can, build a team like that. So I give them a lot of freedom to do that. I have the bare baseline, right? But then I let them do what they're super motivated to do and let them specialize in that. Now, in the programming class, it's a little different. I say it's an 80-20 rule where you should be coding 80% of the time. Sometimes they fudge that a little bit, but it has worked really well because I don't ever want to lose the motivation of the students to keep learning new things. Because at some point, they're going to be like, yeah, I know it's coding, it's coding, it's coding, it's coding. I'm never going to code again, right? Like today, okay, a dozen of the kids are like, I'm multimedia. Okay, so it's good to know because when we go to do final projects, I might give them a little more leeway in that direction because ultimately I want the kids to be successful. I don't want to just see, I don't know. I don't need any kind of recognition for it. I just want them to enjoy it and be really happy with their experience on the way out. I don't know. I guess I think of a classroom as an experience, and they're living human, breathing humans, and I want to see them be successful. So I let them go that direction. Concepts you think would be covered but aren't covered by Unity Learn. That's a really good question. Topics that aren't covered by Unity Learn. One is setting up version control on GitHub. I don't think it's on there. One is getting deeper into beyond Create with Code. I want a Create with Code 2, like a sequel. There is actually something called Create with Code 2, but it's just it's basically the same thing, but updated, I think, for Unity 6 maybe. But I want to see it get deeper into things like arrays and topics that traditional programmers would expect you to know if you took a semester or 2 of programming. I would love to see that. And I know video production and creating those courses is no small feat. So I know it's a lot of work, but hey, Unity, you should hire me and some of these folks, and then we'll get together. We'll make a sweet coding course. Okay, Unity, sound good? Okay. All right, let's do that. I asked. Awesome. There's a moth on my screen. Get off. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody. I hope everybody has a good evening. Dee, I know you're in France, and it's like 3 a.m. there now, so